Welcome to Beyond the Lab, a series by the Office of Career Development and the Biomedical Research Education and Training Department of the Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. My name is Kate Stewart, and I'm here today with Puck Oy, who graduated from the Department of Cell Biology in 1999. So welcome back. Thanks for coming to talk with us, and tell me more about what you did here at Vanderbilt.
Thanks for having me. So I have a long history at Vanderbilt. I was an undergraduate here and graduated in 1993, and then matriculated into the IGP that same year, and did my PhD here when the CDB department was still cell biology, doing my thesis work with Kathy Gould. So that's my history at Vanderbilt.
So what do you do now?
So I left in 1999 after finishing my degree to do a postdoc in Boston, and returned here in 2007 as an assistant professor in the Cell and Developmental Biology department, which is where I've been since.
Okay. So what does your daily workload look like? What does that include for you?
That really varies depending on the time of year. So sometimes there are heavy grant writing periods. Sometimes there are periods where I have to teach more intensively. And sometimes there are just periods where I can hang out in the lab and interact with the trainees that I have, and also do bench science myself, which is what I prefer to do most of the time.
Okay, so percentage-wise, would you say, how much of time are you spent doing each of those?
I really try to protect my time at the bench, and so I would say that during a normal time, like when I'm not writing grants, I usually try to spend around 50% of my time at the bench. And the other 50% of the time is spent doing administrative things or, again, engaging with my trainees and helping them to think about their projects and guide them through their work.
Okay. How is being an associate professor a good fit for you?
That is a great question. And I think fit is always a discovery process. And so I've gone through many different phases as being a professor. It's not everything that I thought it was going to be when I was a postdoc, but it's something that I've definitely love. And I think the major reason why I love it is because of the discovery process. I love science, I love biology, and I also get a lot of satisfaction from seeing the people in my lab go from being a graduate student, having some experience, but maybe not a lot, and then coming to be this extraordinary scientist at the end of their training period. So I think for me, it's about the discovery process and about the process of teaching and helping to train people think about science.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the transitions between being a graduate school student to a postdoc and then being a postdoc to an associate professor. What did that look like? What are some of the skills that you needed to make that transition in each of those phases?
Okay, that's a great question. So I think as a graduate student, the most important thing, at least for me, was to get a firm foundation, both technically and also in terms of knowing the field, knowing the literature, knowing how to ask questions. That's kind of the most important thing in graduate school, at least for me. And also learning to not be afraid of trying to answer questions, despite the fact that they may be hard. When you go on to do a postdoc, I felt for me the biggest challenge was to think of problems that were going to be important enough for people in the field to recognize that your contributions were meaningful, worthwhile, and also worthy of granting a professorship position to, so you could continue your research program. And a lot of times that's non-trivial to think of a problem that is going to be niche forming or allow you to carve out an area in the field that you can call your own. And I think that's one of the biggest problems I think that people face as they transition from being a postdoc to a professor. At the professor level, at least being a junior professor as I am, that problem is magnified even more. So while you may start your lab with a facet of a project that you took as a postdoc, the goal, I think, as a junior professor is to expand that into a whole program. So you can kind of think of it as this inverted pyramid, I guess, where you start, by acquiring the necessary skills to be able to ask questions and answer them, and then blossoming that over time so that you can recruit a team to answer a very important program of questions or a set of questions.
Tell me about the skill sets that you had to build once you became a faculty member. What are the things that you really had to learn that you didn't get in your grad student or postdoc training?
There are a lot of things that being a postdoc doesn't teach you that you need to do as a professor. I think that nobody teaches you how to do accounting, for example, and you really have to be able to track money streams and where they're going to, how much you want to effort, how much of your funds you want to allocate to a particular project, and also to recognize which projects are going to be fruitful in getting more funds to be able to continue your research program. So a lot of people say that running a lab is kind of like running a small business, and that's very true, where you have to again recruit a team, and then you have to manage them effectively to be able to accomplish a certain set of tasks. And so I would say that it's the fundraising and the PR that you have to do for your lab, as well as management. Not all scientists are people, and you just have to learn how to do that, or it's going to be very difficult, I think, to succeed in the business. And so I think multitasking is a very big part of the challenge of being a professor. I found it to be very useful to be able to switch gears from writing in the office to doing experiment and making those transitions seamlessly so that you can really maximize the amount of time that you have in a day. That gets to a life-work balance issue that I think you're going to get to later. But really, managing your time is very, very critical, I think, as being a professor.
Okay. So what activities or coursework would you think recommend to trainees, graduate students, and postdocs who would be interested in a path like you?
Training and coursework. Again, that's a very difficult question because I think it depends on what the graduate student wants to do. If they want to, so if the goal is to get a position in academia, I think one wants to always do the same thing, which is to challenge yourself by talking with people that bring you out of your comfort zone. Because I really think that that's a very important aspect of this business is to always be pushing your envelope in terms of what you think of as being capable and what you think the capacity of your lab is. You're always going to want to go beyond that. Because of that, I think it's really important to interact with a wide group, a very diverse group of people with very diverse skill sets, because those people are going to help you think about problems in ways that you may not have in the past, and also maybe encourage you to take some steps to do things differently. And this is something, again, that you should practice when you're a postdoc, even when you're a professor. I think this is always an important goal, to be engaging people that force you to think differently.
Okay, so I think you're talking a lot about networking for sure. And tell me what that looks like for you, really. Are you meeting people at conferences? Are you going to coffee? Like, what is networking to you?
All of the above.
Okay.
I think networking is I don't know if I would really call it networking. I think it's just looking for people to interact with that think about problems in interesting and creative ways, and also who have sort of a similar way of thinking about a similar view of the world in terms of making progress, like what's required to make what you would consider reasonable progress. And that definition is different for everybody. But if you can find people that have philosophies about that, it can be very gratifying, and you can establish great collaborations that way, and just in general establish a really nice network of people to interact with regularly over decades.
Okay. So let's talk about your job search. What were some of the strategies that you used to get your faculty position?
I think it's very important as a postdoc to be present at meetings, to be visible, so that people are aware that you're a deep thinker, that you have different ways of thinking about things that are non-conventional is fine. In fact, I think non-conventional is what you want to go for because you want to be viewed as being unique or having something unique to offer the field. And so the more you engage people, the more that they will be able to get a beat on who you are and as a scientist and what you're capable of. The whole process, I think, of engaging people in the field before you go on the job market is kind of pre-interviewing, really, right? And when your application finally goes out, the goal, hopefully, is that people will pick up your application and say, I know this guy. He has a really interesting way about thinking about things and is a really talented experimentalist and so forth. So I think that the more you can do that, sort of establish connections in the field with people that are going to be on search committees and so forth, I think the better off you will be.
Okay. So I know that you were in a situation where you and your wife were looking for a job at the same time, and she is also in a similar role and position. How did that go? I know a lot of dual couples are looking for a career at the same time. Any words of advice, or what did you guys do?
So that's also a great question. I was about 3 years ahead of my wife in terms of starting my postdoc. So I was in Boston for 3 years as a postdoc, and she joined me after she finished. She was also a graduate student with Kathy Gould. And so one of the key things that we did was to wait to go on the job market until she was ready, meaning that she had a number of papers out from her postdoctoral career that let her put together a nice package herself. So not going into the process prematurely, I think, is very important. I think also being realistic about the type of places that you want to go to. We had to make sure that we were matched in terms of what kind of environment we wanted, what kind of lifestyle we wanted. The truth is that it's very difficult to get a job in academia, so we sent applications to many, many places. And when we had the Venn diagram where we saw the overlap, we just went with that, of course. But there was a predetermination of the places that we would think about applying to based on where we wanted to be 10 years from then.
Okay. So while we're talking about your family, let's talk about work-life balance. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, work-life balance it can be challenging, especially during grant writing time. Luckily, we haven't overlapped in terms of writing grants at the same time, which, it's hard enough for one person to be writing a grant in the household. Work-life balance is really tough. And when we were postdocs, we were both used to working as long as we wanted to. And on some days, we would go in at 8 o'clock and not leave until midnight. And we enjoyed that. That's not a luxury we have now. So what our usual day looks like is we take off for work at around 8:30, and we usually get home around 5:30 or 6. And the whole family does taekwondo, so a few days a week, we don't get home until 8:30, and that's on every night. It's pretty much a scramble to get dinner on the table. But we try to put emphasis on the time that the family does have together. As much as we can, and we try to make sure the life quality at home is really high. It's also important that the family has activities that they enjoy doing together as well as alone. So I have some hobbies outside of work that help keep me sane, and that's very important as well. So,
Good. So what are some words of wisdom that you would give trainees that you wish you would have known when you were a graduate student?
I really enjoyed talking with other trainees when I was a grad student, but I feel like I didn't do a really good job of engaging people who were doing things that were significantly different than what I did. Maybe that was representative of the science culture at the time. Where people followed their own disciplines and got really good at that, and that was good enough for training at that time. These days, training as a graduate student is very different. A lot of emphasis is being placed now on combining different disciplines, for example, physics and biology, or computation and biology, or chemistry and biology. And so it's actually people at the interface who have expertise in both backgrounds that are probably going to be best positioned to be the next generation of leaders in the field. So what I would encourage trainees to do these days is to not be afraid about combining different disciplines. Pay attention in chemistry class, pay attention in biology class, because they're all interrelated. And the more you can combine disciplines or think about problems in biology from a different angle that may involve physics or computation or chemistry, the higher the chances that you're going to be thinking about things in a more innovative way that other people may not be thinking. So look for people that have expertise in these diverse backgrounds and engage them as best as you can. That would be my advice.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure being here.